she ended up coming over to the farm to be our farm educator. So that was just cool, kind of like deepened our connection with them. So then they were hosting the State of the Plate event with Illinois stewards, and then so they did it out at Martinelli's because they were worried about the weather. So I was like, well, it'll rain at the farm, but at Martinelli's it's inside. And then that's when I guess one of Nikki's staffers came to that kind of policy dinner, and then he was like, it was interesting because he's like, yeah, do you mind like she's doing this listening tour about the tariffs? And I was like, well, we're like this intentionally locally focused company, so like
Good evening. The time is now 7 p.m. Today is Monday, June 2nd, and I'd like to call to order this rescheduled meeting of the Urbana City Council. Would clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Hersey,
Here.
Councilmember Colasetti,
Here.
Councilmember Bishop,
Here.
Councilmember Wilkin, Councilmember Wilkin, Councilmember Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Williams.
Here. All right. Our first item of business is the approval of the May 27, 2025 special city council meeting minutes. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
All right. Motion to approve the May 27th special city council meeting minutes by Councilmember Wu, seconded by Councilmember Hersey. Are there any corrections? All right, seeing none. All those in favor for approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, that motion passes. All right, next item is additions to the agenda. Are there any additions? All right, perfect. Seeing none, next item we have is the mayoral proclamation for Gun Violence Awareness Day, and it seems like we have a few members that will be joining me, so I'll meet you up front. We're gonna get an applause app to, for when you come next time. Come on up, come on up. All right. So here we are. Whereas more than 120 people in the United States are killed by gun violence every day, and over 200 more are shot and wounded, with nearly 19,000 gun homicides annually. And whereas Americans are 26 times more likely to die by gun violence than people in other high-income countries. And whereas the state of Illinois suffers an average of 1,719 gun deaths each year, with a death rate of 13.8 per 100,000 people, costing the state an estimated $18.6 billion annually. And whereas gun violence prevention is more urgent than ever, as communities across the nation, like Urbana, are working to prevent it through evidence-based solutions and community partnerships. And whereas protecting public safety is a core responsibility of mayors and local leaders who work alongside law enforcement and community advocates to reduce gun violence while supporting the rights of responsible gun owners. And whereas in January 2013, 15-year-old Hadiah Pendleton was tragically killed by gunfire in Chicago. In her honor, and to recognize her 28th birthday, people across the United States will wear orange on June 6, 2025, the first Friday in June, for National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And whereas the color orange chosen by Hadiah Pendleton's friends now symbolize the value of human life, honors all victims and survivors of gun violence, and represents the national movement to end gun violence. Now, therefore, I, Deshaun Williams, Mayor of the City of Urbana, Illinois, do hereby proclaim Friday, June 6, 2025 as National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the City of Urbana, Illinois, and encourage all residents to wear orange to honor the lives lost, support survivors, and stand united in the effort to end gun violence. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Take care. Yes, indeed. Of course. Take care. No problem. Thank you. All right. Now we will move on to public input. If you wish to provide public input, please approach the microphone. You may state your name for the record, and you will have 5 minutes to speak.
I actually had to turn it down. Thank you. My name's Esther Pat, and I just have a few things to tell you. Follow up to last Wednesday's open house. Nothing in Urbana City Code or Illinois state statute requires you to update the comprehensive plan at any specific time. Both city and state laws state, quote, every plan commission and planning department has the power to recommend changes to the comprehensive plan from time to time, close quote. So the timeline is totally yours. State law also says, quote, such plan may be adopted in whole or in separate geographical functional parts, so you can't break it down. Several of us have asked you to conduct a housing study prior to making any comprehensive plan changes regarding residential neighborhoods. We've been told that the city staff cannot conduct the study until after you approve the comprehensive plan because the study is recommended in the plan. Well, I can propose to you 2 solutions to get around that. One is for the mayor to direct the staff to conduct a housing study. That is something that is his power as chief executive officer of the city. He could do it tomorrow. He has the power to direct city staff to conduct any study or write any report that he chooses. Another strategy would be for the city council to vote to postpone consideration of the plan until after you have received a housing study, which to me makes sense. And a third option would be for you to approve those parts of the plan relating to business and industrial uses, but postpone consideration of all aspects of the plan that deal with residential land uses until after you have received a housing study, so you have some idea what you're talking about. On a different but related matter, which is on the council agenda, I wrote to you to urge you not to change the current council rule that allows 1 member to put an item on the agenda. I won't repeat what I wrote, but I do want to emphasize to you that anytime you relinquish your power as city council members, whether it's your power to set the timeline for the comprehensive plan update or your power to put items on the committee agenda, you're not just giving up your own power, you're giving up the people's power that we get through you when we bring our issues to city government. And I want to encourage you, all of you, the mayor, I know everything's warm and fuzzy right now, but the mayor has a lot of power that you as council members don't have. You as council members should preserve every single power that you have, because that's what we elected you for, is to do what you can. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Joanne Buddy. I would like to comment on 2 items on your 2 agendas tonight. On the City Council agenda is the revision of City Council procedures, and on the Committee of the Whole agenda, the Comprehensive Plan Imagine Urbana. So regarding City Council procedures, I urge you to change the length of time a council member can speak on an agenda item from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. I sent you all an email saying you give the public 5 minutes. Why wouldn't you give each other for 5 minutes? I believe the present procedure is that each member can speak twice for 3 minutes each. The new proposal states 3 minutes until all council members have spoken, and then each member would get 30 seconds for a response. 30 seconds is nothing. I would urge you to allow 5 minutes followed by at least 3 minutes. In the perfect world, I'd urge you to extend the time limits as much as possible so you can fully discuss the issues of importance to the residents of Urbana and not be rushed by procedural time limits. And I realize your meetings are already very long. Perhaps you could limit public input on topics not on the agenda to 3 minutes and public input on items on the agenda to 5 minutes. I also urge you to keep the present procedure of allowing 1 council member to put an item on the agenda for the Committee of the Whole. You each represent a different ward with very different issues, and there are only 7 of you. Each of you should be allowed to put an item on the agenda without having to lobby with other council members to get support of your item before any discussion takes place. I would also urge you to clarify voting procedures. Do you want the current abstentions count with a majority procedure? Are abstentions counted as a vote or a non-vote? How are present votes counted? Are they considered a non-vote or ultimately a no vote? Now I'd like to switch to Imagine Urbana. Where will we see the questions and answers from last week's town hall? When will we ever see specific details about public engagement? Where and when were the meetings held? How many people attended? How many people said things about housing, about education? What were the questions that were asked? This information must be available. For some reason, the staff is not forthcoming with that information. We are being told not to worry about how the plan will affect our specific neighborhoods because the staff will follow up the comprehensive plan with neighborhood plans. And I handed out, before the meeting started, amendments to the 2005 plan, and there, one was a Crystal Lake neighborhood plan and one was a downtown Urbana plan. The downtown Urbana plan took 7 years after the original plan was approved. So you can see I don't have much confidence that my neighborhood's going to be taken care of. It might take 7 years and it might not happen at all because it wasn't included in the 2005 plan. So I am concerned about how Imagine Urbana will impact my neighborhood, and is there a neighborhood plan for West Urbana? We have also asked, what kind of zoning changes do you anticipate? Just give us 1 or 2 examples of what you're thinking. The response was, we don't know until the plan gets approved. This reminds me of a piece of legislation passed a number of years ago in Congress, in which it was a 2,000-page bill, which nobody had read, and they said, oh, we'll read it after we approve it. So what is this? We can't tell you what kind of zoning changes we're anticipating until after we pass the plan? Can't we just have a couple of examples? Further, the staff has said, as Esther just said, that they are required to do a comprehensive plan, and I'm not sure if they said every 20 years, but they said, we can't not do it, we're required to do it. And as Esther said, I can't find, just like Esther said, I can't find any reference to a comprehensive plan being required, and no stipulation that a plan has to be approved every 20 years. This plan does not need to be approved and does not need to be approved this year. And Esther already quoted, in the Urbana Code of Ordinances and in the Illinois State Statute, it says the Plan Commission has the power. It doesn't say they have to do it. So you don't have to rush this process or this decision. You need time to study it in all its details. And I suggest you need more public input and more time to review the 2005 plan and what was not accomplished in that plan. If you read through that plan, there are many things in that plan that were never accomplished. And it would seem we should be reviewing that plan to see what's still relevant and moving the items that didn't get done to the top of our list to finally get done before we create a new set of goals. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other?
Good evening, Council. My name is Adani Sanchez. I'm actually a resident of Champaign, but I'm here on behalf of Curbanism Club in support of the comprehensive plan. Curbanism Club is an organization that advocates for a variety of housing, a variety of transit options, and connected communities. The Urbana Comprehensive Plan does all of those things and encourages our community members, our council members, everyone to kind of see and envision a future where Urbana is growing, where Urbana is vibrant, and welcomes a variety of people regardless of their ability to get a home loan. The Urbana Comprehensive Plan is talking about connecting communities together through bike infrastructure, through making sure that our grid is connected, which means that it's also connected to every part of the city, which means all of the investments that y'all have made in these businesses in downtown, that means people can get to those regardless of whether or not they have a car, even if they have a bus pass. So making sure that all these communities are connected is very important, and I'm very excited to see that. I also want to say that it's very important to the goals as well that the city has indicated. So diversity in income level, so diversity of people who can buy houses or who can rent in places that they might not otherwise be able to because they can't get a home loan. So a variety of duplexes, triplexes. This is very exciting. This means that you're giving people options for housing, which is very exciting. And I think that, again, infill development is very important to the environmental goals that the city has set. So that's very exciting, connecting and using the infrastructure that we've already built and allowing more people to use it and take advantage of it because we've already made those really big investments. And so I encourage council to resist the urge to fossilize Urbana. Things that are fossilized don't usually stay alive for very long. Thank you so much.
All right. Are there any letters of written public input that was asked to be read into the record? None? Okay. All right. We will move on. All right, so the next item is closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, negotiation, and pending litigation pursuant to 5 ILCS 120-2C1, and 5 ILCS 120-2C2, and 5 ILCS 120-2C11. Can I get a motion to enter into closed session?
So moved.
All right, can I get a second? Wait, was that Bishop? All right, motion by Councilmember Wu, seconded by Councilmember Bishop to enter into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, negotiations, and pending litigation pursuant to 5 ILCS 120-2C1, 5 ILCS 120-2C2, and 5 ILCS 120-2C11. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colacetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Grace.
All right, that motion passes. For the public, we are now entering closed session and will return to council chambers for the remainder of the agenda items and subsequent meetings afterwards. Thank you.
Mayor, can I move that we come into open session?
Second. All right, moved by Wu, seconded by Chandra, by James, by Quisenberry. I am so sorry. Clerk, will you please call the roll? Sorry.
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans.
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colacetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin. Councilmember Wilkin. Councilmember Quisenberry.
Yes. All right, thank you. Now we will move on to council input. Does anyone wish to provide council input? Mary Alice.
I would just like to say thank you to everybody who came out to the open house on Wednesday. I think a lot of people had some really good conversations, and I was really happy to see the turnout.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Now moving on to reports of officers, we have the FY26 budget presentation. So Elizabeth, Don, and Deshaun. All right. So yeah, we've had some really tough choices, in bringing this thing to life. Understanding the challenges of balancing priorities, with limited resources hasn't been the easiest. This budget reflects what matters most to the community as a whole. These priorities are a step in the right direction, for the city of Urbana. I understand, we're facing real uncertainty, coming from the federal level, from shifts in funding and to unpredictable policy changes as well. There are a lot of factors that impact our local planning. Right, so as a city, though, I said we're proud to stand for inclusion, diversity, and immigrant rights. Right, so we have to understand, though, with that, standing firm may come at a cost, as we are seeing. Part of that cost is potential loss, federal support. So when federal support falls short, our most vulnerable residents are going to be the first to be at risk, and when that happens, it's our job to be that safety net. So Urbana is strong because of the people who live here, and I just want everyone to understand and know that I'm going to continue to listen, continue to lead, and fight for what's right, and we're going to do that collectively as a team. So I will get into it. Some of the takeaways, as you see: commitment to keeping our community safe, making sure every resident has a place to call home, building a strong, inclusive local economy, and following through on the city council goals that have been put in place. Ms. Elizabeth.
So before we dive into the details, just a few words kind of about the setting. As always, we're happy to be the home of the University of Illinois because they bring a lot of stability to the local economy. They're a very large employer. Some other points, the U of I flash index was at 102.4 in April. So any number over 100 says the Illinois economy is growing, and that's good. However, that is down from 103 at this time last year. So still a growing state economy, but not growing as fast. Inflation has moderated. Current CPI is about 2.3%. Last year when we presented the budget, it was 3.5%. Unemployment is at 3.3%, which is reasonable. We gained 2,500 in population roughly in the special census, and we expect to see that reflected in our state per capita revenue distributions that we receive in the month of June, just based on the timeline that I discussed with the Department of Revenue. A couple things that are a little more concerning maybe. The housing price index has increased by nearly a 7.8% in the last year. And if you go back to the first quarter of 2020, which was the start of the pandemic, the increase is 48.5%. That's fairly alarming and concerning. Housing is far less affordable for Urbana residents. As you know, and we'll talk more about this later, the state is ending the 1% grocery tax on December 31st, 25, and that brought us $1 million annually. So that kind of threw a wrench into our plans. And also, of course, as the mayor mentioned, things that are happening at the federal level just bring a whole new degree of unpredictability to trying to put together a budget. The potential withdrawal of federal funding, tariffs, and I don't even know how to describe it all. I'm just going to leave it at that. So let's just say that there is significant risk ahead for us. So with that, I'm going to give it back to the mayor to talk about highlights.
All right, so we'll start with public safety and well-being. So essentially, the funding summary goes as read here. So funding for three patrol officer positions, totaling $367,000 annually, plus $207,000 in one-time cost. With that, we are also presenting a the community engagement team. A sergeant position is being presented and funded at $157,000 for 3 years to support some of the community engagement efforts that I'm wanting to, actually see put forward. In regards to the fire department, I have an $86,000 one-time investment in firefighter training, as well as $220,000 one-time allocation for personal protective equipment, PPE, and uniforms. Additional equipment, as far as the fire department is concerned, is to be determined. We will move on to housing. So CDBG and home funding. I've allocated $3.1 million allocated over 4 years to support critical programs and related staffing. While the impact may not be immediate, these commitments also cannot be quickly reversed if a new federal administration happens to change directions. $1.5 million has been set aside, which includes $500,000 from the General Reserve Fund remaining after resolution of property tax disputes. I've said from the beginning, Urbana will not be bullied. Our sanctuary status reflects our values and dignity, safety and community for all. So, if the federal government wants to fight, over human rights, they'll find Urbana standing strong and unshaken in that regard. As far as the infrastructure, so the unmet infrastructure needs will continue to be a struggle. Even after the city council approved significant increases in the local MFT here recently, but $925,000 for additional equal projects, and as of December 31st, 60% of those planned expenditures had been spent, spent or placed under contract already. Let me see here. We will go to economic health. All right. So we are committing a local match of $800,000 to support the Heartstrong grocery store project aimed at improving food access. This also includes city contributions of land demolition, environmental remediation, and waived construction-related fees to make the project viable and impactful. I have also included 25,000 reparation study for Black Urbana. Funding is allocated for a reparation study in collaboration with the Champaign County Reparations Coalition, advancing efforts to address historical inequities in our community. We are currently reviewing proposals as well for redevelopment of Illinois street lots, and planning the demolition of the former school district administration building to prepare the site for future community-focused development. And we've received multiple responses to our RFP for festival development, signaling, again, strong interest and momentum as we begin shaping a new direction for culture and economic growth through events. As far as we have other highlights here, an arborist / LRC supervisor role at $131,000 annually. An HR generalist is being presented at $131,000 annually, plus a $10,000 one-time occurrence, with a .25 FTE law clerk and .5 FTE administrative assistant in legal at $52,000. Parking fund pilot payment reduction, $100,000 recurring, as well as a $400,000 one-time. Lastly, as far as my portion here is concerned, we will go to the grocery tax, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier. But we are proposing to continue the existing 1% local grocery tax, which the state of Illinois recently eliminated at the state level. The reason for that, it's important, to note that, 212 other Illinois cities have already chosen to maintain this tax, in particular locally, to support essential services. As you know, this tax is designed to have minimal impact on our most vulnerable residents. SNAP purchases are fully exempt, meaning those in the lowest 20% income bracket pay an average of just $1.64 per year. Most households pay between $30 and $85 annually, a small amount that adds up to a big difference for our community. Essentially, the thought around this was, by continuing, the city will generate approximately $1 million in reliable local revenue, essentially. This is not a new tax. It's a continuation of an existing one, structured in a way that protects those, least able to afford it, while ensuring we can continue to move our community forward. And at this time, I will pass it on to Don.
So this chart shows the revenues for all the funds. And for reference, when we look at charts that show all the funds, in-the-fund transfer are always excluded. This is done so we can avoid double counting, since a transfer from one fund to another would otherwise be counted twice. So when we're looking at charts for a single fund, like the general fund, we do include transfers because there's no risk of double counting on that. So total revenues across all funds are projected as $78.4 million in FY26, and that's about $5.7 million less than in FY25. The main reasons for this decline is that in FY25, we included several one-time revenues, such as an increase in state and federal grants, also including major grants for constructing 2 new fire stations and proceeds from the bonds that the city recently issued. In FY26, $45.7 million, or about 58.3% of total revenues, excluding interfund transfer, is budgeted in the city general fund. And this fund supports most of the city core services, including police and fire protections. So this chart shows the breakdown of taxes for most properties in Urbana. As you can see here, the city receives about 13% of the total property tax bill. So however, only a quarter of that 13%, or $2.8 million, goes to the city general fund to support city services. And that means just over 3% of the total property taxes paid by property owners actually fund city operations. The largest portion here of the city share goes to the library, which receives about $4.4 million, or 39% of the total. This is followed closely by police and fire pensions, which receive $3.9 million, or 36%. So in the budget, property tax revenue includes both the city's portion and the pension portion. The pensions funds are considered pass-through. It's collected by the city, but used solely for pension obligations. The school district is responsible for 54% of the total, and then other taxing districts, such as the Park District, Parkland College, the townships, make up the balance. And this chart shows the FY26 budget for all funds by department. The largest share of the budget is Public Works at about 42%, which includes expenditures for capital improvements. And this can vary quite a bit depending on the capital improvement plan. Community development is about 19%, and police is about 16%, then followed by fire, which is about 11%. General services is about 4.5%, and that includes expenditures in the VERF and retained risk fund. These are not attributed to a single department. So in FY25, capital spending is higher in other years shown on this chart. This is partly due to the timing of encumbering funds for major projects, such as the construction of the fire stations. And in FY26, we expect continued investment in capital projects. FY25 and FY26 are also significant years for spending on services. This is largely due to grant funding, including awards supported by ARPA. Although our CDBG and home allocations have decreased, we are still spending down funds from prior year's awards. And in addition, a portion of this spending supports planning services for major capital projects in the capital improvement funds. So total expenditures are $93.3 million in fiscal year 26, and 41% of which is for personnel, and that includes salary and benefits and contributions to pension plans. This is followed by spending on services at 33% of the total. And with that, I will hand it over to Elizabeth, and she's going to talk about the general fund.
Okay. So this pie chart shows general fund revenues by source, and as you can see, it's a little bit complicated. There's a lot going on there because we have many different sources of revenue in the general fund. Total estimated revenues for the general fund for FY26 are about $49.7 million. If you look at the kind of on the upper right, the purple, the green, and the red, those are all sales-related taxes. So we've got the state sales tax, we've got the home rule sales tax, and we've got the state use tax, all related to retail sales. And that is those combined are the single largest piece of the pie, about 32% combined. So about a third of our general fund revenues are sales-related. That's followed by income tax, a little bit over 15%, and then property tax, which is very close behind that. But as Don mentioned, that includes the pension contributions that, because of accounting standards, pass through the general fund, but aren't really there to be spent for city services. The increase in general fund revenues is about $465,000 compared to the estimated amount for FY25. And that increase is really driven by the mayor's recommendation that we continue the grocery tax. But when we compare year to year on a recurring basis, the increase is about 7%. So looking at just general fund expenditures by classification, total is about $55.1 million. You can see that about 2/3 of that, the purple piece at the bottom, is for salaries and benefits, including those pension contributions. We also had some large one-time transfers, such as the additional $4.5 million for capital improvements that we discussed in the context of the capital improvement plan recently. And then we kind of get to talking about how we balance the budget, and I feel like you've all heard me say this about 1,000 times, but there's really two indicators that we use. We talk about the balance between recurring revenue and expense, and then we talk about fund balance as a percentage of recurring expense, and the financial policies set goals for both of those things. So looking at the recurring revenue and expense in the general fund, we have recurring expenditures at 47.8 million, which is 97.7% of recurring revenues of 48.9 million. So we're within that policy limit there. And again, that makes sure that we can maintain a stable budget, even if our revenues fluctuate a little bit, which does happen, especially when you're so dependent on sales-related taxes. So looking at the fund balance in general fund in relation to recurring expenditures, that blue line on this chart shows what our policy target is for fund balance. And then the purple portion is the unreserved fund balance, which we use to meet our policy goal. The green portion at the top shows the amounts that are reserved. So our unassigned fund balance is projected to be about 12.23 million. Again, that's the purple part. That's 25.6% of recurring expenditures, so it exceeds our policy goal, which is good. The green part, the reserved part, is 5.5 million, and that is made up of 3.1 million, which we believe we will need to sustain critical home and CDBG programs, as well as the associated staffing, because we need people to manage those programs over a 4-year period. So even though that money has not disappeared yet, we fully expect that it will. And even if the next federal administration wants to bring it back, they can't spin up a whole agency overnight, so it could be a long haul. There's an additional 1.5 million there to support other programs that serve Urbana residents, perhaps that are not administered by the city, in case they also lose their federal funding. So, we're concerned about things like rental assistance through the Housing Authority and the LIHEAP program. There are a lot of programs like that that are very important to our residents. And then 873,000 reserved to fund the second and third years of the Community Engagement Team pilot program. So because we weren't able to staff that program this year, we've basically shifted the 3 years out a year, and FY26 will be the first year of the 3-year pilot. So looking ahead, again, we're just going to say this over and over. We're on the list. We're on the Department of Homeland Security list. We all know that. There's considerable uncertainty about exactly what that means and how much damage is going to be done by the current federal administration. That's the negative. On the positive side, if we continue the grocery tax, that does give us some flexibility for the future, even beyond this budget year, potentially to absorb additional recurring expenditures. And the amount of that flexibility, as you know, the numbers are kind of changing every day, is probably about $370,000, we estimate. So we're going to wrap this up by just talking about the plan for review. So as usual, we'll schedule discussions on different topics that we think are significant in the budget. June 9th, the library will speak to you about their budget, which is actually approved by the library board. Then we will have fire staff here to talk about training, uniforms, and personal protective equipment. We'll do a more detailed presentation. Braden and Dawn will do this to talk about the reserves in the general fund and some more specifics on that. And then on the 16th, we would talk about police staffing and also continuing hiring incentives, which we feel we need to do to be competitive. Talk about the support staff and legal division, HR staffing, and the Arbor and LRC position that the mayor mentioned. Also on the 16th, we would hold a public hearing that was advertised Saturday, and that's just consistent with requirements in our city code and the Illinois Municipal Code. And then that would be the committee of whole meeting where we bring the ordinances to approve the budget as well. Then on the 23rd, we would be looking to adopt the budget and approve a budget amendment. So I know you're all familiar with the drill when we do amendments, which require 6 of 8 affirmative votes. We only need 5 votes to approve the budget. As we're going through these conversations, if there are things that you would like to bring up as potential changes, then I think up until the point where we get to the 23rd, that could be done with a poll, and we can reflect those in the exhibits for the ordinance. If there are still changes occurring on the 23rd, that obviously that will require a motion to amend the ordinance at that point. And as you know, sometimes we need to make sure we get really good clarity to translate your words into numbers in the budget. So you might see me down here kind of waving my hand, trying to make sure I understand what you're asking for. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you have tonight, but we'll have 2 more weeks to answer questions as well.
Just off the top, what budget amendment will we be approving that night?
So when you adopt the budget every year, we amend the current year budget to conform to the estimated amounts that you see in the budget book.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. All right, thank you.
Mary Alice?
It would be helpful if we had a list, the total number of FTEs that are proposed to be reoccurring and the total number of FTEs that are proposed to be one time or over a couple of years, just so we can look at that. I wanted a little bit of clarity in terms of the 3.1 million that was being reserved. That's not to be spent in a single fiscal year, but that is if it comes to fruition, it would be spent over 3 years. Is that correct?
If it comes to fruition, we think that would carry us for 4 years, but that will be reserved as part of the fund balance, and so it could not be spent without a budget amendment approved by the City Council.
Okay, so the 3.1, and I was taking notes, I missed where the 500,000 was coming from. Is that from general?
So there's an additional 1.5 million reserved for other programs,
Right.
and that's $1 million of that is coming from the general fund. $500,000 million of that we're transferring from the general reserve fund because we know that there will be some left over in that fund after we close out all the property tax settlements, which will happen very soon.
Right. And then last but not least, I appreciate the narrative giving us some more information in terms of the plan. But I'm wondering if we can have just like an actual spreadsheet that just lays it out for us with the amounts, if that makes sense. It's just easier to kind of read rather than me making notes and so forth.
I'm sure we can come up with something on that as well as the recurring and one-time FTEs.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Evans.
So am I understanding this correctly? We're gonna hire 3 new patrol officers? Is that correct?
Correct, that's the plan.
And then we're gonna hire 1 additional community engagement officer.
The proposal for the community engagement team is that position would be a sergeant, not an officer. So somebody at a higher level to provide some direction.
So a total of 4 new police officers, correct?
Correct.
And then plus an incentive package for the police that is separate from the contract, or?
So we'd like to extend the current hiring incentives, and we talked about this, and we feel like that's necessary because every other agency that's competing with us for police officers is continuing their hiring incentives.
Okay. And this is going to be paid for, because in the financial forecast in February, you said any recurring expenditures is going to need a tax. Would that be covered by the grocery tax probably, or?
So all of the increases that you see here, well, some of the things you mentioned are one-time expenditures, not recurring expenditures, but all of the proposed increases in recurring expenditure would be covered by the continuation of the grocery tax.
Okay. And then I'm going to have a email question for you about property taxes. You may not be able to answer it, but I'll just give you well, I would like to see, because you won't, it's not your purview, but I would like to know how much the school district is, the numerical amount of millions they're taking from that 54%.
Yeah.
You know,
That's all information that's available.
okay, great. I'll talk to you later.
I'll look for your email.
All right, I'll go with Chandra.
Oh, yes. Do you have any proposals of new sources of income? Is that part of the budget process to think of new sources?
So the proposal that's included in the mayor's proposed budget is the continuation of the grocery tax.
Okay, so that's the only one.
Right, that's what we need to make it work. And we've talked about other options. You probably remember that. So some of those could still be on the table in the future.
Okay, such as like the bag fee tax thing?
Yeah. I
don't
mean, I
know
think
if we're
that is
calling it a
coming
fee
at
or a
some
tax.
point, but we have not built it in here specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Sharice.
I guess my main question is, because, and Chris kind of hit on it about the 3 new police officers. Are these 3 police officers in addition to the 6 that need to be replaced?
Correct. This would increase our authorized staffing by 3, so we'd still be intending to fill any vacancies that we have currently.
Okay, thank you.
Jaya.
So I noticed that the first slide mentioned the alternate response initiatives. I'm wondering if that is in the budget. And I raise that especially related to the fact that it's my understanding that the city of Champaign has just invested almost $1 million in their co-response model. And I want to make sure that we, as their sister city and one that's been studying this for a long time, is actually putting some money behind it. So I'd like to know where we are.
So in last year's budget, you probably remember that you allocated $150,000 on a one-time basis plus $300,000 recurring. So that $300,000 will be in the budget every year. In addition to that, we rolled over the $150,000 that has not been spent this year. Plus, we scooped up about $55,000 that was left from the public safety study when the Barry Dunn arrangement was terminated. So all of that is included in the alternate response budget in next year.
And I apologize, I didn't put that in my explanation because I thought we knew.
Haven't had a chance to dig into this yet. It's going to be a busy month of reading.
James.
So, sorry if I missed this as we were going through here. The community engagement officers that we added during this year, we didn't approve the budget amendment to do the space, the furniture, et cetera, for that. Is that embedded in this budget?
Yes, it is. It's all rolled over into next year, everything that they need to implement the program.
All right, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Chandra?
This isn't necessarily related to the budget, but I'm looking at the mayor and council goals. It goes up to the end of this year. Will we be revisiting them to revise and maybe add some new ones if we've completed them?
Short answer is yes.
Okay.
But yeah, short answer is yes. Are there any additional questions? Grace, are you still with us in the clouds?
I am. Thank you. No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right. Seeing as there are no additional questions, thank you, Don, and thank you, Elizabeth. All right, next we will have reports of standing committees. And seeing as though there are none, we will move on to have items forwarded from the Committee of the Whole. I believe Grace has asked Jaya to present these items on her behalf.
Yes, following up on the fact that Grace is in the sky, joining remotely. On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I'd like to move the following 2 items for approval on the consent agenda. Ordinance number 2025-05-016, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, Harding Drive at Steer Place, 1202 East Harding Drive, and Resolution number 2025-05-028R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for participation in the Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network, IPW MAN.
Second.
All right, motion made by Jaya, seconded by Sharice. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colacetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes.
Okay, then the first item on the regular agenda, I'll move resolution number 2025-05-034R, a resolution approving the capital improvement plan fiscal years 2026 to 2030.
I don't have anything new to present, but I'm here for questions.
Is there a second for the
second?
motion?
I'll second.
All right, motion moved by Jaya, seconded by Chandra. Are there any questions? All right, seeing no questions, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colacetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes.
Next, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I'd like to move resolution number 2025-05-029R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code State Motor Fuel Tax for Florida Avenue, Wright Street to Hillcrest Street for approval.
Second.
All right, motion made by Jaya, seconded by Sharice. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
All right, Sharice?
Aren't B through G, no, not G, F, did we omnibus those?
So your motion was to combine them in omnibus at Committee of the Whole, and you forwarded them to the regular agenda, therefore they have to be taken one at a time. If they'd gone on the consent agenda, yes, they would have still been an omnibus.
Okay.
We can, at this meeting, at your discretion, combine any items into omnibus and approve them if that is your desire.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, can I change my motion to recommend omnibus first for resolution items on the regular agenda B through F?
I would second that, if we need a second in order to do that.
Well, if we're amending the original motion with the original seconder, Hersey, except, okay.
Motion made by Jaya, seconded by Sharice. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, point of order. This is a resolution, so a voice vote could be done instead of a roll call?
So we're at council, all of this is final action. My preference would be that this be roll call to combine into omnibus, and then also roll call for passage, which requires a separate motion.
Required?
Final action requires a roll call vote, yes. That is the procedure, and that is, I believe, also outlined in the city code.
Okay.
Because each individual vote must be audibly attributed to a member for final action, as opposed to a unanimous, ambiguous yes.
Mary Ellis?
In order to omnibus, do we have to read all of them that we're putting together?
If you don't want to repeat them, probably.
Do I need to read the first one again, or
Let's
just
do it.
from then? All right. So that means resolution number 2025-05-029R, resolution for the improvement under the Illinois Highway Code State Motor Fuel Tax for Florida Avenue, Wright Street to Hill Street. Resolution number 2025-05-030R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code State Motor Fuel Tax for Florida Avenue Shared Use Path. Resolution number 2025-05-031R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code, state motor fuel tax for Baker's Lane shared use path. Resolution number 2025-05-032R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code, state motor fuel tax for Colorado Avenue resurfacing. And resolution number 2025-05-033R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code, state motor fuel tax for Vine Street and Illinois Street improvements, all be included in this omnibus item with a recommendation for approval on behalf of the Committee of the Whole.
All right, motion made by Jaya. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sharice. Any discussion?
So just to clarify,
Uh-huh.
we are first combining them in omnibus, and then we are approving them. So the current motion is just to combine an omnibus, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So, motion moved by Jaya, seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey?
Yes.
Councilmember Colacetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Yes.
All right, so now we need a motion to approve. Do we need to read those all over again?
No,
All
you may
right.
just state
A
approve
motion-
the omnibus.
Can I get a motion to approve the omnibus?
So I'll, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, move these items for the omnibus.
I'll second.
All right, motion made by Jaya, seconded by Mary Ellis. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey?
Yes.
Councilmember Colacetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I'd like to move resolution number 2025-05-035R, a resolution authorizing an interfund loan from the General Operating Fund to the Central Tax Increment Financing District Fund for approval.
Second.
All right, motion made by Jaya, seconded by Mary Ellis. There any further discussion? All right, clerk, will you please
I
call
have
the
a
roll?
question.
Go ahead, Grace.
If there was a follow-up from last week clarifying the central TIF remaining balance and outlook.
Elizabeth?
Yes, I can provide that, and unfortunately, you're not here, so you don't have your budget book in front of you, Councilmember Wilkin, but on page 217 of the budget is the fund statement for the central TIF. So you can see that we're projecting a negative cash balance of about 3.3 million at the end of fiscal year 25, and that's largely because of the timing of paying that incentive before we issue debt. That's without the interfund loan. By the end of FY 26, there is a positive cash balance of about $5.7 million. However, that's due to, number one, the debt it gets issued in FY 26, but also we have assumed, and this could change, that we would probably port about 5.1 million in from TIF 4 at the end of its life. However, we're still discussing with the school district whether they might support an extension of that TIF, so we may not have that $5.1 million. So without that, we would be down to something around $500,000 in the central TIF at the end of FY 26, if our spending occurs the way we expect it to.
Thank you. And to follow up, was our balance like $7 million a year or two ago for central TIF, just on building acquisition and demolition, or where did central TIF money go? If you could refresh our memory.
I don't have information that goes back that far in front of me. I only have the budget, which is at this year. So, I mean, obviously it was spent on allowable purposes for TIF, such as there's some staff costs in there, there's various development projects, but I don't have all that detail.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mary Ellis.
Yeah, Elizabeth, the numbers that you were talking about, I must be reading this incorrectly. So on page 217 is the fund statement for the central TIF. It looks like can you tell me what the ending balance after fiscal year 26 is the estimate? Is that 2.5 million? Or am I reading that incorrectly? No, that's the expenses, sorry, 8.9 million.
Yeah, it's 5.7 almost, it's 5,682,000, but that includes the 5.1 million potentially being ported from TIF 4, and that may not happen. So this is a fairly.
All right, sorry, I was misreading it. And then the other question I had was the estimate for the taxes, the property taxes, is that accounting for the Royer Hotel property tax that should be collecting next year?
It takes a while to go through that cycle of being fully assessed once construction is completed, so I'm not sure how much we'll actually see next year.
Well, isn't it, it's a commercial property, right? So that has a different way that they calculate the property tax.
But even so, anything we receive is going to get passed through to pay the debt service on the bonds. It's not available for other purposes.
Right, I just was thinking that it would show up in this central TIF. So what I'm hearing you say is it won't show up in this central TIF.
It will, so it will show up in the central TIF. The property tax increment will show up in the central TIF. Then it'll be transferred out to the debt service fund. The food and beverage tax revenues, the hotel motel tax revenues will show up at the general fund and be transferred to the debt service fund. So there's we're gonna have to very carefully track all those streams related to the hotel to make sure they go to pay off the debt.
And is TIF 4 in the book? Because I didn't see it.
Yeah, should be a few.
Probably somewhere.
It's, the fund statement is on page 213.
Before central TIF.
Because it's older.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colasetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin,
Present.
Councilmember Quisenberry,
Yes.
All right, that motion passes.
And then finally, on behalf of the committee of the whole, I'd like to move ordinance number 2025-05-017, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment 9, present settlement hotel Royer incentive.
Second.
All right, motion moved by Jay, seconded by Wu. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colasetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry,
Yes.
Mayor Williams.
Yes, the motion passes. All right. Next item is reports of special committees, which there are none. So the next we will have a discussion item on council rules and meeting procedures, and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Wilkins, Quisenberry, and the clerk, and whoever else may want to join that conversation.
So just to start, at the request of Councilmember Quisenberry and Councilmember Wilkin that this item appear on the next council agenda, it is here. Based off of your notes from items that you guys brought up in the initial discussion last week, I just added them to the memo in no specific format, just as a bulleted list, and indicated that if you were interested, you could consider straw polls. We can also, I'm happy to answer questions about some of the stuff because one of the items that I included was actually just a reference citation rather than an actual suggested straw poll because there were questions and I didn't have the language handy in regards to abstentions and conflict of interest and what was already in the city code. That being said, yeah.
Mr. Quisenberry.
I'm going to make a confession that 6 days ago, when we were talking about this, and I was arguing with myself about whether it should be on the next council meeting or the next COW agenda, I was not thinking straight because both the COW agenda and the council agenda were today. And so I do think it's valuable for us to continue to have a conversation about this, but given the amount of stuff that's still yet to be done, I don't have anything to add at this point. If people have things to add at this point, it would be good to add it, but I think we're gonna have to circle back to this at a future time, maybe even after we've passed a budget.
I was just going to say, looking ahead at the next month, especially after we saw the budget presentation, and we are anticipating a large number of staff presentations, at least for the meetings on June 9th and June 16th. We've got some long nights ahead. June 16th, there is also the special meeting, the Township Electorate, a Township Board meeting, and our city budget hearing and our city committee of the whole. So the remainder of the month of June is very busy with budget season.
Fun times ahead. Sorry. All right. Well, seeing as though, James.
I mean, it is just a discussion item. It doesn't require action, and we can take it up again whenever we feel it's time.
Okay. Jaya?
I think other people are saying this too. I think that picking this discussion back up after budget season makes sense. Just support that idea.
Awesome. James? Grace? Anything?
Yes, I agree with picking the discussion back up. I will just say 2 quick points that I agree with extending council input time to 5 minutes, but I don't think it needs to be unlimited or beyond that. I think we need to be succinct, and it's not a discussion. It's just a one-way communication. We discuss each item individually. And I'm also very concerned with the idea of limiting access to the agenda with having a higher requirement that skirts OMA requirements for having 3 members add something to the agenda. I continue to find that very concerning and am not on board with that piece.
All right. Thank you, Grace. All right. Seeing there's no further discussion, with no further business before the body, this meeting is adjourned. We will begin the regular committee of the whole meeting shortly. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to call to order the City of Urbana Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, June 2nd. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Wu?
Here.
Councilmember Evans?
Here.
Councilmember Hersey?
Here.
Councilmember Colasetti?
Here.
Councilmember Bishop?
Here.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Here.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Here.
Mayor Williams?
Here.
All right. We don't appear to have any minutes to approve for this meeting, and I'm not aware of any additions that we want to make to the agenda at this point. So we are at the point for presentations and public input. Would any member of the public wish to speak to the City Council? Seeing none, I do have one letter that was requested to be read at tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting. Dear Mayor Williams and City Council members, please read this into the record at tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting. My name is Anna Ho, H-O-U-G-H, and I'm a resident of Ward 2. I'm writing in support of Imagine Urbana and encourage you to move it to council as currently drafted. I like a lot about the comprehensive plan, but big idea number 1, that Urbana is a place for everyone, really shines through the entire document and is the idea most important to me. I was born and raised in Urbana and want everyone who wants to be a part of the community to be able to do so. I also know that that is not the case currently due to lack of affordable housing. I work in homeless services and search for affordable housing most days. There isn't a lot available, and what is available is more than my clients can afford without becoming cost burdened. 30% income towards housing costs, including utilities. Most households end up taking what they can get when a housing opportunity arises, with little thought given to location. Everyone should have a choice to live in a place they like, near the things they need. We lose a lot in our community when we price out households or push them to the margins. Zoning was a tool to create and entrench segregation, and that legacy is still with us. We now need to undo that legacy and reform our zoning code to be inclusive and reflect our community's evolving needs. I love my neighborhood in Ward 2. I love the housing options available, including detached single-family homes, duplexes, and small and mid-sized apartment buildings. I love that there are businesses and public spaces nearby. I can easily walk or bike to the library, grocery stores, restaurants, parks, and community events. I also live near a transit hub, so I rarely need to drive, even when my needs extend beyond what can be met in downtown. The connectedness and diversity makes the neighborhood vibrant, and it's why I love living here so much. I think these are things that a lot of us value, and I feel privileged to live where I do. Everyone should be able to live in such a place, but a lot of our city is designed in a way that makes this impossible. I grew up on the edge of Urbana in a home which is no longer on the edge of the city. And this form of growth, prioritizing single-family homes, while not inherently bad, is not financially or environmentally sustainable, nor is it inclusive of many people's needs, especially those needing alternative forms of transportation. The zoning and other reforms recommended by the comprehensive plan allow for more connected neighborhoods and abundant housing options. It allows us to welcome more members to the community and brings down the cost of rent so current residents have a place to live, preventing displacement. There was a lot of talk at last week's meeting about homelessness. It is important to know that the root cause of homelessness is the housing shortage. Research tells us that consistently, yet we make it difficult to build housing. By creating scarcity in the housing market, we have created homelessness. City staff did a great job soliciting feedback to make Imagine Urbana a plan for everyone, and I want to thank them for their efforts. Change is scary and people want their neighborhoods to remain the same, but we can't prioritize neighborhood characteristics over the well-being of the entire city. People need places to live, Urbana needs more tax revenue, and I think the comprehensive plan puts us on track to do that. Best, and Ho. Right, any other public input? Seeing none, we'll move on to staff reports. No staff reports, so new business. First item up for discussion is resolution number 2025-06-036R, resolution approving the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium Consolidated Plan for fiscal years 2025 through 2029 and annual action plan for fiscal year 2025 through 2026.
Good evening, everyone. So the next two items on the agenda are separate but related, so we will be discussing them together, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have separately. Before you tonight is our consolidated plan for 2025 through 2029 and annual action plan for this upcoming fiscal year of 2025 through 2026. We did provide a presentation back in March during our public comment period, going a little bit more in depth into the consolidated plan and the annual action plan. And so tonight we'll be talking about the resources that we have available and what our plan is for the upcoming year. So just to recap a little bit, the consolidated plan identifies the needs, goals, and strategies related to affordable housing and community development needs in Urbana and in our community, and how funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development will be utilized to meet these needs over a 5-year planning framework. So this document is really our strategic plan and also our budget for the next 5 years. I think Elizabeth did a good job earlier of highlighting the uncertainty that we will be facing over the next several years, and so we'll just keep that in mind as we present on this tonight. So as an entitlement grantee, the City of Urbana receives allocations of CDBG and home funding every year from HUD. The completion of this 5-year plan and of our 1-year action plan are statutory requirements for this funding. We will be submitting this plan to HUD for approval. But more importantly, this planning process is essential for us as it helps us identify community needs and allows us to outline the strategies that we will be undertaking to meet these needs and to match those needs to resources that are available. So again, just to provide a little bit of context of how this document is structured. So again, the consolidated plan, it's that kind of longer term 5-year strategic plan. And it's broken down into 1-year annual action plans during that 5-year period. Our 5-year consolidated plan contains the first year action plan. So that's why it's kind of those 2 documents combined into one. And then the subsequent 4 years, we will be bringing annual action plans each year in that planning cycle. So what you have in front of you tonight is that kind of longer term 5-year plan, and then the first year implementation plan. So Nick will talk a little bit about how we came to the strategies and the activities and projects that are contained in the plan.
Yep, thank you, Braden. Good evening, Council. So we looked at a lot of things to inform the plan. A lot of this is going to be reflected in the needs assessment and market analysis components of the plan, which we, again, talked about in a bit more detail in our March presentation. But just to run through a few of the things we looked at. Numbers-wise, we were looking at things like the census and American Community Survey. HUD also puts out a report regularly called the Comprehensive Housing and Affordability Study. That's a very useful tool. And we also looked at more locally generated data through organizations like the Housing Authority, the Continuum of Service Providers to the Homeless, and so on. Those quantitative sources, there's a lot to glean from there, but we also wanted to supplement that with more qualitative insights from folks on the ground. So we did a lot of outreach through engagement events. We distributed a needs survey throughout the community and sent out mailings to our entire target area to solicit participation in that survey, and received just under 200 responses to that. So we got some great insights there, and those are reflected in the plan. Then we also did sit-down consultations with nearly a dozen service providers in the community.
Thank you. So here's kind of the meat of what we'll be presenting tonight are the resources that we will be receiving from HUD to fund these important projects and programs. Now, I want to distinguish between this next year of funding, which we have been notified that we will be receiving, and you see the allocation amounts listed here. So we did receive notice from HUD. We will be receiving funding for this upcoming year. So for the Community Development Block Grant, we will be receiving $392,195. We anticipate having about $200,000 in program income. And then you also see our prior year rollover balances, and then you see the total available in FY26 is just over $1 million. And then the projected amount that we'll have over that 5-year period, which again is a projection and is subject to change depending on what happens at the federal level. For the Home Investment Partnership Program, we were notified that we will be receiving $633,154. And then you see we have a sizable prior year rollover of $2.9 million. Available as well. And then Home ARP, that was a special allocation of funding, a one-time allocation of funding through the American Rescue Plan that we received. We have a balance of just over $1.7 million, which we will be able to use up through 2030. So that is funding we will be continuing to utilize in our community to benefit low-income housing and community development needs. So the way the plan is structured is, again, thinking of it as a strategic plan for housing needs and community and economic development needs. We are required to set our priority needs for the 5-year period, and then we drill down. Each level is more specific into our goals and how those goals will meet those priority needs, and then going down to the more specific level of the projects that we intend to implement in order to further those goals. So I'll walk through those and the budgeted amounts that we have assigned as well. So the priority needs, these are very general, you'll note. This is just like that kind of high level over the next 5 years. What are those priority needs we see in the community? Obviously, the first priority need, affordable housing. We know that that's a critical need in the community, and expanding affordable housing is very important. Second one is community services. These are the vital services that our residents rely on. And so that's a critical need as well. And then thirdly is community development. So again, drilling down, so those were the priority needs. The goals, each of these goals, again, ties back to furthering those needs, investing in affordable housing, supporting households in need, encouraging community and economic development, and then planning and administration. So we budget at that goal level. So again, this is our 1-year budget. So for this upcoming year, these are the allocations that we have assigned to each of those goal areas. So invest in affordable housing, goal 1 there, $135,000 in community development block grant funding, $3.2 million in home funds, and then $1 million in home ARP. Support households in need. You see those amounts there. And then encourage community and economic development. We've committed $648,000 in CDBG funding to that goal. The reason that there's no home or home ARP funding committed to that goal is that it's not an eligible expense for those programs. Economic and community development is only eligible under CDBG, so that's why it's budgeted that way. And then you see our planning and admin costs there. Across each program, those are tied to the caps that HUD has assigned. So we're capped at $78,000 per year for CDBG admin, $63,000 for home admin, and then we have a balance of about $35,000 in home ARP. Admin. So again, you see those 1-year totals, and that's the funding that has been secured for this upcoming year. Those 5-year totals, that's the our best case scenario for our projections over the next 5 years. It's presuming that we are going to be receiving normal, relatively stable allocations over the next 4 years. I hope you can see this okay. It is in your memo if you're having a hard time seeing that. So now we're going down to the more specific level of the projects. So these are the specific discrete activities that we will be undertaking in order to further those kind of broader goals that I was just talking about. So they're broken down. Goal 1, planning and admin, that's relatively straightforward. Goal 2, neighborhood stabilization. We have our property acquisition and demolition program, which we have about $100,000 set aside. Code enforcement in targeted areas, $35,000. Under housing and support services, $58,000 set aside as our public service amount, and that amount is capped by HUD as well. Our housing rehabilitation program for low-income homeowners is $130,000, and then housing program delivery, which pays the staff time to administer our housing rehab program, is just over $43,000. And then under neighborhood revitalization, you'll see public infrastructure, so that $298,000 that will go to support and supplement the EQL program for infrastructure in targeted low-income neighborhoods. Public facilities, $250,000 set aside to improve public facilities that are used by low-income Urbana residents. And then we have $100,000 set aside for economic development activities. So that's the breakdown of our CDBG projects for this upcoming year. Home projects, have it broken down similarly. We have the planning and admin amount there. Community Housing Development Organization, we have $150,000 set aside to support the development of affordable housing. That funding will go to support those CHODOs, Habitat for Humanity, First Followers, in the work that they do. And then we also have a set aside in capacity building support for our CHODOs. So that's things like staff time to help them implement their affordable housing programs. We have $30,000 set aside for that. Tenant-based rental assistance, which is also funded through the HOME program. We've set aside $300,000 in this upcoming year to support TBRA contracts. And just a note on that, we've doubled our commitment to TBRA in this upcoming year. And again, that just reflects the increased need for rental assistance in our community. 1.7, just over 1.7 million of our home allocation is set aside for Champaign. We're in a consortium with Champaign, so they get a portion of the home funds, and then and it's based on percentage based on population. Urbana's set aside amount is 1.2 million for affordable housing development projects. So you see that total, that's for the upcoming year of home projects. Home ARP, again, this is that one-time allocation of 1.7 million, just over 1.7 million. This is budgeted as follows: $1 million for affordable housing development, just over $631,000 for supportive service contracts, and then we have $100,000 set aside for nonprofit capacity building and operating. And then the one thing I'll mention, just as a reminder, Home ARP was designed specifically to target individuals who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So it's a little bit different from Home or CDBG, which are based on your income, and if you're income eligible. Home ARP is specifically to be targeted for those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So it's a little bit more of a targeted program. Okay, so that's our very quick presentation on the consolidated plan and our annual action plan. So the reason we have this is it's related to our 5-year plan. It's an update to our housing program manual. We do this update every 5 years along with our consolidated plan as our housing programs are funded through the CDBG program. So we're updating this for that same 5-year period to coincide with the consolidated plan, and I'll pass it over to Nick to talk a little bit more about the updates that we made from our prior 5-year housing program manual.
Yep, so as Braden said, this is something that we update with each consolidated plan period just to make sure that this manual that we use kind of in the day-to-day administration of these programs on the staff side is encompassing the activities that we've identified in the consolidated plan, and is also reflecting any updates to HUD policy since the last time the manual was updated. So just as a few examples, in 2024, a rule went into effect requiring radon testing and potentially mitigation for any project receiving housing assistance through HUD. So we just added some areas in the manual where we're specifying how that's incorporated into the workflow. And then a few other areas just added clarity in some circumstances that we've had come up in the program from time to time, such as potential for cost sharing when estimates for projects come in over the program maximum, and specifying how we can handle circumstances like that. So really just an opportunity to dust the manual off and tighten the screws to make sure it's going to carry us through the next consolidated plan period efficiently.
So we'll be happy to take any questions. Again, I know that was a lot of information. Just a note on kind of timing. Our consolidated plan is due to HUD July 12th, so we will be submitting it to HUD. And then the program year begins July 1, technically, and so funds will be made available for this upcoming year starting July 1. But we'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
All right, any questions? Mary Alice.
Hey, well, thank you. Thank you for also printing this off very last minute. I look forward to digging in a little bit here. I had some immediate questions, specifically because we've recently had several apartment buildings that were condemned. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit to the code enforcement that you've listed here.
Yeah, so the code enforcement goes to supplement building safety staff time for doing code enforcement in those CD target areas. So those targeted areas, just as a reminder, are census blocks in Urbana that are 51% or more considered to be low income. So any time that building safety staff spend doing code enforcement in those areas, they can bill to CDBG to help supplement their salaries. So that's what that goes for.
So I believe we have 3 inspectors right now. I could be incorrect about that. I believe we approved an additional one last year. So does this mean, is there enough money to add another half of one that could target specific buildings?
So currently this amount can support half of one,
Right,
which is
that's
the
what I
one that
meant,
we, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So maybe that's a question for Elizabeth in terms of how is that represented in the budget?
I believe what Braden's saying is we already are supporting half of one.
Yes.
Okay, that's
yes.
I just want to be clear about that.
Yes, yes. So this is an ongoing. Every year we
Okay.
include the funding. There's a code inspector who he is assigned to do kind of that more targeted code enforcement, and so he bills the hours that he spends in those targeted areas to us, and then we pay that portion of his salary.
Gotcha.
Yep.
My next question had to do with TBRA. So those are contracts that we have with different entities that are able to administer those programs?
Yes, exactly. So we enter into contracts with service providers. They actually do, they run the program. So currently we have 2, Champaign County Regional Planning Commission and Courage Connection as well. Those are our 2 current TBRA providers. So we provide them the funding, and then they administer the program and submit their reports to us in terms of numbers served and things like that.
One of the things that I was able to glean here is the impact of domestic violence on homelessness. And so Courage Connection, I believe, addresses part of that population. Is that right?
Yes, they're the domestic violence shelter in the community, so they handle, if there's clients who, for example, go to RPC looking for rental assistance, but they have a background or a history of domestic violence, they'll get referred to Courage Connection.
Okay, all right. And then my last question, which is going to be kind of big, so don't feel like you have to answer it completely. One thing that I've been quite concerned about is I recognize that rental rates are beyond the means of many people in our community, and we have these TBRA programs, but in terms of sustainability, it concerns me. And so the home ARP funds that we have quite a bit of money set aside for affordable housing units. Do we have people who are interested in partnering to build those affordable housing units? At the end of the day, that's really what's going to be able to sustain that population.
Construction, is that what you're?
Yes, construction.
Yes, there are. Those projects, take time to kind of get off the ground, and there's a lot of different factors. We have some partnerships with Housing Authority. That is a goal of this plan, is expanding units. Obviously we want to utilize what we have and ensure if people have a unit, but they need assistance, we can get that to them. But we also recognize that building new units is going to be a necessity, and so that's part of this as well, for sure. And in addition, the $1.2 million that Urbana has set aside in home funds is dedicated for construction of affordable housing.
Right.
That's what it is set aside for, and so that's part of my job, is pursuing that and trying to get those projects realized.
And was it fiscal year 2030 that those funds expire? Is
The
that
home
correct?
ARP, yes, 2030,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chris.
Thank you. What does it mean to invest in affordable housing? And there's $4.3 million set aside. What does it mean to invest in affordable housing?
So the way that goal is set up, when we say invest, we mean invest in constructing affordable housing.
Okay, so about the affordability issue, an SSI check is no more than $900 a month. A disability check is usually no more than $1,500 a month. And new construction, the rent on new construction is usually, I don't know, $1,500 a month. So I don't understand how new construction can ever be considered affordable to the kind of people that need it. So I don't know what you do with that, but.
So I definitely understand, and that's often why we try to pair it with options for, rental assistance. So if there's, existing units that are, and people are already living in those units, keeping them housed, that's always the priority. If someone is in housing, you want to keep them housed. And so rental assistance, TBRA, that's a very effective way to do that. For new construction, one of the issues is construction costs are going up. That's contributing to it. It's the cost of construction materials is a huge driver of that. For a one-bedroom unit, the way it works is that there's an affordability cap. So, for example, a one-bedroom is capped at around like $950 per month. But then, depending on the partnership that we develop with the housing authority, for example, or another service provider, they then can come in like with a voucher. So the way it will work is that the tenant then pays, so there's that $900 affordability cap, but then the resident will just pay up to 30% of their take-home income, and then the voucher covers the rest. So it helps kind of bridge that gap. And again, so the construction is one part, but then it's what kind of vouchers can you attach to the project to help bring that affordability down even more? Because you're correct, $900 a month might sound affordable for some people, but for other people, it's not affordable.
Right.
So ensuring that there is the additional investment of a voucher or some sort of supplemental assistance to ensure that no one is paying more than 30% of their take-home income on total housing costs. So that would include utilities and things like that as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, but I guess that leaves the problem that we're only spending $300,000 on vouchers to be split between RPC and I forget the other, Encourage Connections.
So the TBRA is one thing. I was speaking to, so for example, like the vouchers that Housing Authority has, their Housing Choice Voucher Program. That's a very robust resource that a lot of, so for example, in Champaign, Bristol Place, which is a very large, new, affordable housing development, Housing Authority has invested vouchers, which is a permanent investment in that development. So people who want to live there can get a voucher to help defray that housing cost. So TBRA is slightly different. It's rental assistance. So it's typically for people who are already in a unit that just can't make their monthly rent. They can apply for up to a year of rental assistance. So again, we're trying to bring together different resources. So there's the new construction, there's the housing vouchers through the Housing Authority, and then there's also rental assistance, which is kind of a separate avenue of assisting people.
Okay, so the Housing Authority opens up these voucher windows to apply, and they get 5,000 households applying in that 2-week period. Bristol Place, in one day of opening it up, 500 applicants in one day. So I guess I just don't know if we're providing much capacity here. I mean, I'm not blaming you, and I'm not, but we've got a huge need.
Yes.
And I just don't see the numbers addressing it very much. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think the one thing I would say is that kind of gets back to the importance of continuing to build, because one of the reasons that Housing Authority has those wait lists is because there just aren't enough units. So if you're able to, so oftentimes there is money for a voucher, there's just not a unit for the client to use it on. So the hope is that by investing money and building more units, then you're able to kind of pair vouchers with those units and kind of cut down on that wait list.
Thank you.
Shreese?
A segue into what you were just saying about not enough units, because my question is, I have seen signs where there are already certain apartments or buildings or whatever that seem to be warehousing units, meaning that they have leases and it'll say, lease your apartment for fall. It's specifically going toward the student population, which means that if they're already leasing out for fall, they have no intention, I don't think, of housing anybody between now and September or August. How do we deal with that? Or do we deal with it at all?
That is a good question, and I would agree with you. I think student housing is oftentimes not accessible to people who need affordable housing in the community. I think that's another argument for continuing to invest our federal resources in building permanently affordable, set-aside affordable housing, because again, oftentimes that student market's just really not accessible to a lot of people who need it, especially families. I mean, a lot of those units are not built for multiple bedrooms or things like that. So
But what about just the single person who needs a roof over their head? I don't see why we warehouse or we allow warehousing of space when there's vouchers, when someone could have a voucher, and that would take care of that particular cost of housing.
Yeah.
Correct?
Correct. And I think as well, one thing I'll say is that this is where our partnership with the Housing Authority has become very important, because the Housing Authority does a lot of that landlord engagement, and they interface a lot with landlords to try to get them on board, to try to bring them in, and to kind of prevent things like that. And so they've rolled out a lot of incentive programs, things to get landlords on board. So I think that's something we really rely on. In terms of what the city could do, I think that I don't have a good answer for that, but I definitely recognize that's a problem for sure.
Okay, and I wasn't sure if we actually, I would like to be sure that we don't condone that. That's the one thing I would like to be sure of. But it is bothersome when I'm driving through my neighborhood and I'm looking at apartment buildings that have that on the fence, already leasing for fall, which means you're not going to be renting during the summer. You'll hold that for somebody, and I know we have a housing problem. I know we have an affordable housing problem. I would like for it to not be thought of as low-income housing. It should be affordable for everybody. And we need to think in terms of, too, not location. Affordable housing should be available everywhere in the city, not just in one part of the city. And I would like for us to think more on that level. An issue that I have with some of the people that are against the comprehensive plan is it sounds to me like what they're against is competition. But maybe somebody will bring in a duplex and it'll cost less than what they're able to get from a student. And we need to think about that type of thinking as well. So I just want to keep that in mind.
All right, any other questions? I have, go ahead, Mary.
I have one more question. I can't find the page, but there's conversation about adequacy of housing in this document and the lack of appropriate kitchens. That was surprising to me because I thought that at least in rental units, we had certain rules in terms of what constitutes a kitchen. So is there any way to understand a little bit more what that means? And is there anything we can do at the city level to ensure that that's more workable?
I can speak to that.
Sure. So that's a statistic that HUD tracks, their comprehensive housing and affordability study. One of the housing problems that they tracked is substandard housing, and then the subcategory of that is lacks sufficient plumbing or kitchen facilities. And while you're correct that we do have a rental registration program and properties get inspected on a cycle, I think what we've seen is just with the amount of rental housing there is and our capacity to get to things, I definitely don't want to throw our building safety division under the bus because they have their work cut out for them. But what we've seen, and I think especially in circumstances like with some of the properties in the city that have recently been condemned, just the time in between inspection cycles, things can deteriorate pretty extremely. And this is particularly a problem with some of these households at the lowest income levels, or households who might have been receiving a voucher or some other form of rental assistance, where it can be so hard to find a landlord who's willing to accept that form of payment, even though legally everybody should be accepting that form of payment. But what we've also seen is that evictions and credit history can kind of serve as a proxy for that. But anyway, when you're in that situation, folks can end up, just willing to accept those substandard conditions because they can't find anywhere else to rent. So it's definitely a problem that we need to continue to be tracking and addressing. But that's just a little more context there.
All right, thank you.
All right, I just have one quick question. The ARPA home amount, which is sitting there, has there been any concern about that being clawed back?
Yes. Just to provide context, we do have some active contracts that we're paying out of that, so it's not just sitting there in that sense. We have several social service contracts with home service providers that we're currently paying out. But yes, that is a concern. I haven't heard anything coming down the pipeline that might happen, but I think given the environment that we're in, we should certainly plan for it. And I think in the coming months, I think the best strategy for us will be to ensure to get things under contract as quickly as possible, so that in the event that they do try to claw back money, it might be harder for them to do that. But yes, getting it spent as quickly as possible, I think, is very important.
All right, thank you. We have a motion? Chandra?
I'll move approval of resolution number 2025-06-036R, a resolution approving the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium consolidated plan for fiscal years 2025 through 2029 and annual action plan for fiscal year 2025 to 2026. On to City Council for approval on the consent agenda.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second by Sharice. Any further discussion? Mary Alice?
Yeah, I'd like to request it be moved to the regular agenda, just because it's a really, really big document, and trying to go through all of it, if there's any last minute questions, so that's just a request.
Sure.
Sure. Second.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it is a very big document, and I really appreciate all the attention to detail and hard work that went into this. I was reviewing it, and also encourage people as they are looking at the proposed comprehensive plan to look at the housing information that's already in here, and let the city know what else from a housing study would be helpful, because I keep hearing that request. And there's an incredible amount of data from diverse sources related to our housing availability in this document. So I just really encourage people to look at it, because it's a lot of really good information, and thank you to everyone who's worked on it.
All right, Grace, any discussion?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right. This is a resolution, and this is not final action, so I request a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Thank you. And we're moving on next to resolution number 2025-06-037R, resolution approving the housing program manual for program years 2025 through 2029.
So we did discuss this briefly, but we're happy to take any questions that you might have about this.
Any questions, Grace?
No, thank you.
All right. Could I have a motion?
I move. Sorry, James.
Yes, Sharice.
Okay. I'd like to move resolution number 2025-06-037R, resolution approving the housing program manual for program years 2025 through 2029 to the regular agenda for approval.
Second.
All right, seconded by Mary Alice. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Grace, did you want to vote? Any opposed, say nay. I'm going to call that unanimous, and it's passed. Thank you, guys. Next, resolution number 2025-06-038R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement by and among the Champaign County Treasurer, the City of Urbana, and other local taxing bodies affected by the presence property tax exemption case, 15-L-75. And who is presenting on this?
That would be me. I don't have PowerPoint, but I'll just kind of walk through the basics with you all and then take questions. So, as you're all aware, back in 2015, Presence Hospitals filed a lawsuit in the local circuit court seeking charitable property tax exemptions and property tax refunds from the county treasurer, and in so doing from all of the affected taxing bodies that those parcels were located within. That's sort of the broader backdrop. And so over the course of time, throughout this litigation, there have been a lot of twists and turns, but ultimately, most recently, all the taxing districts have worked together and negotiated a settlement agreement with Presence, which is the sort of the underlying reason for this intergovernmental agreement. And what's in front of you, the intergovernmental agreement is essentially memorialization of a shared understanding among the taxing districts that there is a disagreement about how to apportion the amounts owed between and among the taxing districts as part of the overall sum to be paid to Presence under the settlement agreement. And it's a differing perspective, I would say, on two different types of calculations for apportioning the taxes owed. And so through this IGA, the taxing districts have essentially formally proposed to defer the question of how to hash this out, how to arrive at who should owe what, until the amount that is owed to Presence under the underlying settlement agreement is resolved. So work together, settle the thing, get that formalized, and then we essentially under this IGA agreed to spend 3 months negotiating in good faith to arrive at some sort of mutual agreement. The IGA also contemplates what would happen if we're not able to arrive at agreement, what the parties' rights would be to seek judicial ruling on the appropriate methodology for apportioning the amounts owed. This does affect the city of Urbana somewhat significantly, as you'll note in the memo and in the IGA. There's an addendum to the IGA that shows the amounts owed by the parties respectively. Depending on the methodology applied, Urbana's amount owed could differ about $265,000 difference between the two methodologies. So it does make a big difference to Urbana. We have a pretty strong opinion about which methodology is correct, not just because it results in us paying less, but we think it's the most consistent with the manner in which the TIF revenues that are described in the memo were refunded back in 2014. That said, there's good faith disagreement among the parties, and so this IGA would essentially defer negotiation of that until we settle the Presence lawsuit. So I'll take questions.
Mary Alice.
So, okay, there's a lump sum. Let's just say there's $1 million owed at Presence. And so basically, there's a disagreement on what the city of Urbana, what the county, who pays what out of the $1 million. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So this, in essence, says we agree that we owe all the taxing bodies together. Oh, I'm just throwing $1 million as an example there. And we'll discuss amongst ourselves how we're going to divide that up. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, there's no disagreement as to the overall amount owed to presence. That's static, that's agreed to.
And so all this does is say, yes, we agree that the overall amount is X, and we just don't know who's paying all of X.
Yeah, and it's I would say a matter of sort of degree. There's not like massive differences in the amounts, but they're, smaller incremental percentages on those amounts that the respective districts are in disagreement about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes, Grace?
Thank you. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more briefly about how a potential TIF district comes into play here.
Yeah, so that is essentially the core of the, I would say, of the disagreement in methodology. As we explained in the memo, most of the affected parcels that are subject to this lawsuit that President's, claimed a tax exemption should apply to, and they should have taxes refunded for, were during the effective period of time covered under the lawsuit were, most of them were in a TIF district. And so when that TIF district ended, I believe it was 2014, I have Ross behind me in case we get too far into the details. Ross's history with this is quite a bit longer than mine, but back in 2014, when the TIF district ended and the city refunded the excess revenues in the TIF district to the respective taxing districts, they were all refunded at the then applicable tax rate in 2014. And that was applied to determine how much was refunded to each respective district. The differing methodology essentially says we should calculate this based upon what the tax rates were when the taxes were incurred in each respective year covered under the agreement. So I don't want to misstate, but I think it's something from around 2008 or so, 2007 or 2008?
2003.
Oh, sorry, so all the way back to 2003, and basically taking the average of each of the applicable rates annually, and then using that average number to determine the proportions that the taxing districts owe, as opposed to just what the applicable rate was in 2014 when the refund occurred.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion? Yeah.
I'll move resolution number 2025-06-038R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement by and among the Champaign County Treasurer, the City of Urbana, and other local taxing bodies affected by the President's property tax exemption case 15L75 on the regular agenda, just in case people have questions.
Second.
All right. Moved by Jaya, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Grace, any comments?
No, thank you.
All right, seeing no discussion in the room, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Last item on new business, and we have about 8 minutes till our clock runs out, is ordinance number 2025-05-018, an ordinance authorizing the lease of certain real estate, PIN numbers 25-15-29-400-023 and 25-15-29-400-024, located in Champaign County, Illinois, to Prairie Ag Concepts doing business as Prairie Fruits Farm and Creamery.
I will make this as quick as possible. For 5 years now, Prairie Fruits Farm has leased these parcels from the city. At the end of the 5 years, the city issued a request for proposals to see whether, who might be interested in leasing that property. And the only proposal the city received was from Prairie Fruits Farms. So we are recommending that we enter into a new lease with Prairie Fruit. That's hard to say. Prairie Fruits Farm.
All right, any questions? Yes, Mary Alice?
It's not anything that you're going to know off the top of your head, Elizabeth, but there's a lot of items within their proposal that says that they'll increase the number of visitors, et cetera, et cetera. It'd be good to know what their baseline is, like how many people actually come, because I can't find it anywhere. So you don't have to answer it now.
I can ask somebody to look into it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? Grace?
No, thank you.
Clerk?
I just want to point out, and apologies that I didn't bring this up earlier, the 5 is actually supposed to be a 6 in the ordinance number because this is appearing before you in the month of June. So when we make any motion on this, please state that it's 2025-06-018, and again, sorry.
Okay, so if someone wants to make a motion, Mary Alice?
I'll make a motion. I'll move to the next city council ordinance number 2025-06-018, an ordinance authorizing the lease of certain real estate for PIN numbers 2515-29-400-023 and 2515-29-400-024, located in Champaign County, Illinois, to Prairie Agricultural Concepts, doing business as Prairie Fruits Farm and Creamery, for approval.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Jaya. Any discussion? Grace, any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. So we've completed the new business. We have old business on our agenda, and we have about 5 minutes. Either we can move these items to a future meeting, or if there's anything someone wants to discuss about these 2 items, I will need a motion to extend. Mary Alice.
So I personally wanted to just pose something to City Council on the comprehensive plan, but I'm willing to wait as well. I think it would be good to have Grace here physically to talk about the surveillance technology databases. Moving that to July so we get out of budget season seems like it might be a good idea. So those are my 2 thoughts.
Okay. Can we have a motion then?
Sure. I will move ordinance number 2024-12042, an ordinance establishing approval policy and reporting requirements for policing surveillance technology and databasing to the committee of the whole, the first committee of the whole meeting in July.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. And then what is our disposition for the
I was going to
plan?
move that as well, and I'll send people a write-up and tell you what I'm thinking. So I'll move ordinance number 2025-04013, an ordinance approving a comprehensive plan, Imagine Urbana Plan Case Number 2502 CP25. On to July? I'm just trying to, yeah, July. The first committee of the whole meeting in July.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mayor, is that acceptable to you? Okay. All right, if there's no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. We're at council input and communication. We had a chance to do that earlier, but if anybody has something they want to say at the last minute, now would be the time. All right. Since no one's saying anything,
No, I was thinking, but no, that's okay.
we are adjourned.